Hi, Ginny, you all right?
I'm very well, thank you.
We finally started the podcast an hour later.
Yeah, it's been a great morning.
It's been a great morning. We spent an hour talking about podcast.
Yeah. And many other things.
Yeah, and other things. That's fine. That's fine. It always happens. It's okay. So we've had a pre-chat and a post-chat pre this chat, if that makes sense. But loads of people know who you are, but maybe loads of my audience do not know who you are. Do you want to give, like, I guess, a short synopsis, however long you wish to make it, synopsis of said self, not from birth, from, you know, your education journey and what you do now, what you've done, bits and bobs, maybe? Yeah.
We can start at my birth, if you like, because I have actually got a twin. I've got an amazing twin brother. So, but let's go on a little bit from birth. So, went to university, did a four-year degree in Liverpool, teaching degree, and learnt so much when I was in Liverpool, worked in very socially deprived schools within Liverpool, and I've gone Liverpudlian, Liverpool, and learnt so much from the schools I was in. Then I got my first job in Gateshead, back in the days when there were over 300 teachers applying for each job.
That's back in the day. It's
back,
not now.
Back in the day. And I applied for a job near where I lived in North Yorkshire and didn't hear back from them. And I said, why have I not got shortlisted? And they said, we had so many applications. So we all sat in the staff room and we said to the teachers, is there anything that you'd like the new teacher to be able, you know, to bring to the table, to be able to do? And someone went, oh, we'd love someone who could play the piano, which wasn't in the job spec. And you obviously can't play the piano, so your application went in the bin.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So I spent 6 very, very happy years in Gateshead. I was junior trained, but ended up setting up a reception classroom there. Then moved to Northamptonshire for love.
Oh.
And he is now my husband and have stayed in Northamptonshire. So became Key Stage 1 coordinator, deputy head, became head of a village school, and then chose to come out of headship when I had my son. But that is one of my schools where I'm SENCO.
No way.
So, so I still have very, very close links with that small village school. This is my 20th year of being part of that, of that community. Oh, wow. And then I became the SENCO of 2 primary schools in our multi-academy trust, and then 3 years ago became purely the SENCO of the 4 schools in my multi-academy trust. And someone once said to me, never say you're just a SENCO. So I used to say I'm just a SENCO, and someone pulled me up and said, never say you're just a SENCO. So now purely a SENCO. Alongside that, I went on a course about the PACE approach to do with children with attachment issues about 5 years ago, and it literally changed my life. And I felt I had to speak about it to a wider audience because I felt I should have had that training years ago. And that led me into speaking. And so I spoke at an event in Northampton, and then we had COVID, we had lockdown, and I started listening to lots of talks. And many of the talks were from a company called Independent Thinking. And they're an amazing company with amazing speakers. And from that, I did a guest blog. And then from that, Ian Gilbert, who owns the company Independent Thinking, asked me to write my book. Ta-da.
Ta-da.
The book in between the biscuits. And so he said, you got a book in you? And I was like, yeah, of course I have. And the book took me 2.5 years. I know. And it was an amazing process because Independent Thinking, they just kind of took me for who I am, and they were like, do you want it in chapters or do you want them numbered? So it's 113 top tips because we did it that way. And Ian Gilbert was like, Ginny, just write down all your top tips and we class them as sneezes.
Okay.
And
Cool.
so we did all of those, and then I printed them all out and got washi tape and put them in an order, and then they made it into a book. So it's a series of really, really fortunate events. And then from the book, I now do talks up and down the country, supporting SENCOs. And we were saying earlier, the talks I do are interactive. It's not me telling people how to do things. It's about us having those conversations and those interactions about what the role of a SENCO is and how we can help save time, how we can build relationships with parents. We were speaking before about building those relationships with staff who find working with children with additional needs quite challenging. So that's where I am today.
That's you to date.
Yep.
We're back.
From a cup of tea and a biscuit.
From a cup of tea and a biscuit. If you could, like I ask most people or everyone, we've had a short synopsis about your journey and to date. Could we kind of say, like, what was your inspiration to become a teacher? Like, who did somebody in particular inspire you? Or was it just like your parents were like, you be a dentist, you be a doctor, or you be this, a nurse, or I don't know, another job, I don't know.
So I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was at secondary school, when I was doing my GCSEs. And then we had the career advice person came out, and they literally had a book. And we started at A, and we kept going through, and we got to T, and they said teacher, and I went, do you know what? I've got really neat handwriting. And they were like, okay. So I was like, I reckon I could do that. So I went home and I said to my Mum, I've had the careers advice, and I think I'm going to be a teacher because I've got neat handwriting. And she went, oh, yeah. And it kind of all just happened from then. Then she said, you know, your Auntie Joyce, she was a teacher, you know, so it wasn't, I didn't have anyone within my close family who was a teacher, but then kind of, it was like, yeah, actually, I think that's what you should be, Ginny. So it kind of came from the career guide, and we got to T, and I became a teacher.
So did they go A for automobiles? Does that ring a bell? No. B for baker, C for chef, D for doctor, and they just waited for you to, I don't know, have a moment where you go, that's, yeah.
Yeah, that was it. I remember I was in the library of my secondary school, and it was an old school. And I remember to this day sitting at the table, and they literally went through, you know, baker, you know, chef, no, teacher, ding. It was one of those moments. Yes, I think that's what I'd like to do. And then I never wavered from it.
Do you think it's weird, and this is something I've discussed with other people as well, that we ask sometimes a 14-year-old you what you want to be, the biggest decision of your life, what you're going to do for the rest of your life, and then you do it as an adult? Like, would you give any big decision to a 13-year-old? You wouldn't, but you give them the choice to make a choice for an adult that isn't an adult yet. Do you know what I mean? It's like, there's no, it's not gradual. It's not try this, try that. What is it that you want to grow into, whatever but luckily it's great for you because I guess you struck a tone and teach, but you know what I mean? I just think sometimes we have conversation with friends about that. Like, it's strange almost.
I think it is interesting. And I have a 15-year-old son who went on work experience, and we managed to get work experience that was what he thought he wanted to do. And he isn't exactly going down that route now. So I think to be able to experience kind of what you think you want to do is really important, so that you can, like you say, you can gauge whether it's for you. Having said that, when I said I wanted to be a teacher, I was put on work experience, and I spent most of my time in a cupboard untangling threads for some sewing they were doing. So that could easily have put me off, but it didn't. Yeah. So I think it's about experiencing a profession you might want to go into, but also I think it's really important that you kind of go into that workplace with people who will inspire you, you know, and I think that carries on throughout your career. You know, you do need role models so that you can see what you can achieve when you are in that workplace.
Yeah. It's also the quality of that work experience that you've had. If someone just, luckily you were strong-minded enough to know, I know this isn't all it is. But if someone wasn't exposed to different experiences or different mindset, they might have gone, you know what, I'm not being a teacher. This is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And that could be the same if you go to be a gardener for a day and I don't know, you're organising empty pots and that's what you do for 2 weeks. Is that going to inspire you to be a gardener, something you really thought you're passionate about? So I guess, it's the quality of that experience as well, which it's mold your experience molds you, your perception of the world. Yeah. Someone else could have equally gone to another school and the head teacher was engaging with them. The class teachers got them involved in bits and bobs and they've gone, I'm going to be a head teacher. That's me. They walked away from that, but someone else equally could have gone, no, thanks.
Yeah,
no,
definitely.
Thanks.
Definitely.
So what made you go into primary rather than, let's say, secondary? Because you went into junior and then you moved on to reception. Yeah. So what made you, this is an interesting question for me to ask teachers. There's always a very different type of person that does different, you know, what made you pick? How do you pick? What made you go?
It wasn't a conscious decision because I never thought about secondary. And actually, I've never thought about it until now. I was always going to be a primary teacher and I wanted to teach what is now known as Key Stage 2. So my training was Key Stage 2 and I was a Key Stage 2 teacher, a Year 5-6 teacher for 2 years. And then the head said to me, he said, sit down, Ginny. Well, you know, when the head says sit down, you know, there's drum roll, there's going to be an announcement. And he said, I would like you to go to reception. And people go, oh, never mind. They think it's a demotion. If you go from the younger to the older, everyone goes, yay, well done. So he said, would I go down to the reception class? And I said, I will, but I have got no training in that. And I really feel that in order to do the job to the best of my ability, I need to have training. And I went on training after school to get myself trained up so that I felt I would be the best reception teacher I would be. Alongside that, and this is really interesting, when I moved to reception, I had a teaching assistant who knew far more than I did about early years. And I felt I needed to upskill myself. So there was never any thoughts of me doing secondary, but it was very interesting. I thought I would be Key Stage 2. And I moved to reception, and then I must have done all right because then I was asked in the same school to remodel and open a preschool. So we had a whole preschool, the shell of a building, and I was in Gateshead at the time, and the head, it was brilliant. He came up to me again, didn't make me sit down for this one. He gave me an IKEA card, and he said, "There's $2,000 on there. Off you go." And we were right next to the Metro Centre and IKEA. And it was for a head to have that much trust in me and for me to have the autonomy to buy the things that I knew that classroom needed was so empowering. Yeah.
Rather than beg for resources.
Yeah.
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 Which can happen. Or buy them yourself. A lot of teachers do buy resources yourself.
Yeah.
I've heard this a few times now about when people first start out as teachers and how valuable that the knowledge from the TAs are that have been there for a long time, or not been there but just experienced. Do you find that? I'm leading you with the question here, but a lot of schools don't have, unless they're one-to-one support with TAs, they won't have those TAs now, will they? Unless they're supporting a child with special needs. A lot of the time, they might have a HLTA that goes between year groups, but most classes wouldn't have. I don't know. Did most classes have a dedicated TA in your school, or was it just because it was reception? Reception have numbers, don't they? You need more staff, I guess, for reception. But how did it work? Or I think the question for me is, are they missing out on that knowledge from a TA, especially the ECTs now, compared to what you had to draw upon?
Back in the day, there was, I had a TA in reception, and she was fabulous. And when I acknowledged her knowledge, we formed a great relationship and a great friendship. There seems to be TA support within early years, but not as much as the children get older. I think for many, many reasons, but the TA support, in my experience, is generally still there for the early years.
Okay. And so it doesn't sound like you woke up one day, well, I don't know if you did, but you knew you wanted to do primary, and how did that lead to you wanting to do SEN?
That's really interesting. I realised, looking back, I had an affinity to support children with additional needs, but it's innate within me. So in my first job in Gateshead, a parent came up to me. I was PE coordinator. Ooh. Thank you. PE coordinator. There's another story. I ended up becoming a qualified football referee because I needed to, in order to be able to be on a par with other members of staff with regards to that, and with the parents as well. But that's another story. But at the end of my first year, a parent bought me a gift, and it was a whistle. And she'd had my name engraved on it. And she said, "Thank you for everything you've done for my son this year. You don't know the difference you've made." And I was thinking, I don't know what she means. So I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "All of those pieces of paper that you photocopied from A4 to A3 for my son, you will never know the positive impact that had on him, because he had difficulties with fine motor." And it was that little thing that made such a huge difference. And that was in my first school. And then that's carried on throughout my career. What I see as reasonable adjustments, just changing things slightly for a child, I then realised perhaps wasn't commonplace. And so then that got me really into thinking about special needs and how we can support children by changing little things to make a big difference. And that was my way into special needs.
Yeah. Would you say that's, well, inclusion? I see posts about inclusion all the time. So you were naturally doing it. And then I guess that just, through that experience with that parent, it led you to wanting to learn more about it, would you say?
Yeah.
Alongside what you were doing already. So did you obviously carry on teaching and becoming a head, etc.? So did you learn more about SEN on the side, or how did that become a SENCO? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I then became the head of a primary school, and I was a SENCO as well. And I learnt through being a SENCO, and I would meet parents and learn as I went along. And that was really useful, because I remember the first parent who came to me and their child was mid-school career. They came to our school and they said, "We think our child needs an EHCP. Can you help us?" And at that point, I'd never done an EHCP. I have done many since. And I said to them, "I haven't done an EHCP, but let's do it together." And so we did it together, and the child got the EHCP. There isn't one specific route, I think, as a SENCO that you can take, because I'm always finding out new new things about children. A parent came to see me not long ago and said that their child had a diagnosis. And I said, I haven't heard of that before. But the next meeting, I'd looked it up, I'd bought a book about it, and the parent was like, oh my goodness, you've bought a book to find out about it. So it's very much through the children who I work with that I become upskilled as a SENCO.
Mm-hmm. Because I guess every child regardless is unique if they've got special needs or not, but no doubt each child you come across who has special needs that comes under your remit is going to have different needs, which will vary from the last child. There's no one size fits all. You can't just go, well, don't worry, I've got a file here. You're just like this child, so here you go, print and copy. I guess you've got to treat, well, I don't know, do you have to treat it like, let's start from scratch with each child? And you might have some background knowledge, I guess, but I guess, is that kind of what you got to do?
Absolutely. So with the teachers I work with, we start from how the child presents in the classroom, and it's very much finding out from the teacher and the parents together about the child. And I always say that teachers educate the educators. So by having that close relationship with teacher and parent, we then start to have a picture of the child. And then I'm also a great advocate for getting outside agents in to come and support us, because once we've got the beginnings of a picture of a child, we can then get outside agents out who can then support the child in the first instance, support school and support the parents, as you said, for that child. So yeah, I feel very strongly it's about the individual child. It's not about labels. It's about need and about talking to the child. They are at the center of everything. And I have previously thought, oh, I think this will help Nathan and this and this. And actually it hasn't helped Nathan. Whereas actually if I say, which of these would be of help to you? Will this help you? Children are very, very good at identifying what will help them. And we have things, some people call them student passports, one-page profiles, and I love them because this is what I like doing in school. This is what I don't like doing in school. These are the things that will help me. These are the things that won't help me. And by a child completing that with parents and school, we get that full picture of the child. And sometimes you go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that a child sitting in that place in the hall for lunch had such a negative impact on them until they told us.
Yeah. I spoke to someone the other day and they said a lot of things happen to people with special needs rather than including them in it. Because I asked about what does inclusion mean? And I've got what I think it means. And it's like like you've just said, including them in the conversation, asking them. Do you know what I mean? So I guess, yeah, that must be weird. Like if he just asked you before, we would have known that. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so I've got an idea of what a SENCO does. So just for layman's out there, I know everyone's going to be hitting the screen going, it's obvious what a SENCO is because everyone in schools know, but there's a lot of parents that might watch this. And I think I had misconceptions what a SENCO is. Me, back in the day, recently, I used to think a SENCO was the person that would diagnose your child. That's what I thought your job was. Do you know what I mean? So I've come to learn a bit more. If you could tell people, I guess, is it kind of a bridge between the school, the local authority, the parents? Because there's so many different layers to what you do. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, without trying to guess myself, I guess it'd be nice for me to know really. What would you say in a roundabout way? What is the job of a SENCO? For people that may want to be a SENCO or they might have an idea what a SENCO is but not know what it is.
Oh, deep intake of breath there. I'm going to read something from my book. Okay. Because Ian Gilbert, who was the editor of my book and did the foreword for the book, he wrote the foreword. And I think there are 100 statements, but I'll just do a few of them. A shoulder, an ear, a voice, an advocate, a champion, a mouthpiece, a showcase, a brainstorm, a calm in the storm, a break in the clouds, a light in the dark, a family counsellor, a family mediator, an interpreter, a chaperone, a coach, a fan, a referee, a messenger, don't shoot, a way through, a way out, a way in, the one who listens, the one who knows, the one who cares, a friend. That's just a small part of what a SENCO is. A SENCO is often seen as a fixer. And I think this is something that does need to be challenged, because we have amazing teachers. We have amazing teaching assistants who are with those children on a day-to-day basis. And I think the SENCO, as I said with those words, is kind of an interface, sometimes between, as you said, the LEA and the school, the parent and the school. And I think the SENCO is somebody who can hear things differently and can join things together between school and home or the LEA. One thing a SENCO is the person who gets outside agents involved, puts in referrals, and actually, and all SENCOs would say this, they are somebody who spends too much of their time doing paperwork. Because in order to get funding or get EHCPs, we have to send a certain amount of paperwork out. And anybody listening to this, I would say, please consider how you can protect your SENCO's time, because they do need to fill in paperwork in order to be able to get what certain children deserve and what they need. And I am a huge advocate, and I say to head teachers, have you said, I can see how much paperwork you've got on work from home for a day next week? So SENCOs are very busy. I have heard of SENCOs who are trying to get from their office to the toilet, and they have people's, Brian, have you got a minute? Kimberly, da-da-da-da-da. And literally the SENCO's just trying to go to the toilet, and they can't get there without being bothered. I heard of one SENCO, and this is true, they were in the toilet, and someone was knocking on the door to have a conversation. I need to talk to you about Kimberly. I know you're busy. And it was like, oh my goodness me. Yeah, your face says it all. The fact that, it's like we are an emergency service, 24/7, and this idea of you've got me on my soapbox here, but the idea of protecting the time of a SENCO, considering when people send emails. I had a colleague who said, Ginny, I had a parent email me at 9:00 at night, and the dialogue went on till gone 10. And I was like, you didn't need to respond at 9:00 at night. You've made yourself available. So, the SENCO is so many things. And if your SENCO has a Wednesday afternoon for them to do paperwork, please refrain from sending children to them. Because I hear this from so many SENCOs. They're about to do their paperwork. There's a knock on the door. Bethan is here with her exercise ball. Brian arrives with a jigsaw. And it's like the Von Trapp family. And you have all these children. And then the SENCO goes, I'll just close the laptop. And then they say these dreadful words, I'll do that paperwork tonight.
Is that fair? When that time was allocated to do the paperwork.
Yeah.
And you're not saying you can't accommodate from time to time because, okay, fine, I'm here if you need me. This is blah, blah, blah. But if you get behind, you stay behind, don't you? Because otherwise you've got to use your own time to get ahead again.
And it's so important with children with additional needs that we work with the teachers in the classrooms and support them. If children are going out of a classroom to be with a different member of staff who can give them all that time, we just have to be very careful because the child may find ways to get out of class to be with that member of staff. So I always advocate for SENCOs to be in the classroom as much as possible with the teachers, you know, looking with a different set of eyes, hearing with a different set of ears. And I talk about the 50-50 rule. I go into a classroom, work with staff and say, have you considered doing this? And if a teacher says, Ginny, that won't work in this classroom, absolutely. But then we can have the dialogue, and it comes back to this idea of trust between everybody so that we can do the best for the children. So once again, about protecting your SENCO and their time.
So you don't walk around saying, why aren't you doing what I've told you to do with that child who has special needs? You're working with the teachers. And like you've said, you're respecting the fact that they're with the child day in, day out. So is that teaching assistant, and you're working together as a team to find the best way. Like you're suggesting things rather than, you know, pointing a finger and saying you should be doing it this way. So that's probably a good bit of advice, communicating in the right way to tell other people that may be new to the role, and maybe finding friction towards people changing to how they want to do things. And that could be the reason why they just don't feel practically that's going to work, because they may have tried it or something similar, or they know the child that well. That is the reason. Okay. So one thing we spoke about before in our past conversations, which I think would be one of many good to talk about, is how you need to adapt for communicating with so many different types of people. Like you just spoke about one then. A big one is parents, and you deal with a lot of emotions in your job. One thing I remembered, if I think I remember correctly, is what I really liked about our chat. Many things I liked about our chat was about creating the environment first for a conversation, not just talking at a parent, not just, you know, saying this is what I'm going to tell you, and I guess inviting them into the conversation or seeing if it's the right time for the conversation. This is all the little things I was learning from yourself as I was talking. Some things I may know already, but just it was nice to have it reaffirmed from somebody who lives it. And I guess you've got to deal with a lot of emotions in this job. What's that like? Navigating that is it a lot when you first become a SENCO, realising that? I mean, I don't know. For me, I feel like that's a big part for me when you realise all these parents are, I don't know, you've got to make sure that they don't see you as the enemy when they're not getting what they want. I mean, what I did want to ask as well, if I can mix it in at the same time, if I can, is what is it? Do you ever identify a child with special needs, but the parents don't as well? Does that happen in your job? I wanted to ask you that too. I just chuck that in there as well.
Okay,
So
we'll start with the last thing that you said. Communication with parents is so important. Communication from the teacher in the first instance is so important. So when there are parents' evenings, the teacher is talking about the child and about their strengths and areas that they find difficult. So that then becomes what I would say a pathway, which then becomes, actually, I think it would be good if we speak with Mrs. Bootman, our SENCO, about this so that we can find ways to support your child. It's all about the language that we use. When we have that pathway of the teacher and then the teacher, the parent and I, it becomes a natural discussion. It's all about, as you say, how we phrase that discussion. And the parent knows the child best. If a parent is not in a mindset or is finding it difficult at that time, then we revisit it later. I find what is really helpful is to be able to identify strengths and areas to work on. And that we can be quite clear with that it's not woolly. We have things called an early years portage, which is identifying where a child is developmentally on a document from birth. And it goes through the different months of their age. And then we can identify that and go, is this how your child presents at home as well? And if they say, actually, they can do this, this and this, we go, gosh, we haven't seen that in school. So it becomes that two-way dialogue from the very start. And we gauge it. We gauge where the conversation needs to go in that meeting. If I take one example of a parent whose child came to us mid-school career, what I thought I was going to speak about in that meeting didn't happen because the parent came in very agitated. And I said, tell me about your child. Just tell me about your child. And this person was like an inflated balloon, telling me everything about the previous school as they perceived it. And at the end, they were like the balloon had deflated and they just kind of, there was an end. And I hadn't said nothing at that point. And this parent then said, do you know what I like about you? You listen. You've listened to me. And then they cried. And they said, that's the first time I feel listened to. And I know I say about protecting SENCO's time, but I will never, ever question times like that, because that formed the connection I talk about in some of my talks, Spider's Web of Trust, about making those connections with the parents, those initial connections and their views on us. They become years worth of a relationship. Going back to you saying about ensuring that parents feel welcomed. First thing we always do is offer a cup of tea. We say, would you like a cup of tea? And sometimes parents say, you're all right. You're all right. And I say, I'm having one. And then they go, oh, tea milk, 2 sugars. And that first connection is a connection of us all having a drink and us all sitting down together as equals.
Yeah.
And that's so important. The room is really important. To not have a desk between us, because it's us and them. So I ensure that there isn't a desk between us. I don't sit on the whizzy chair, because the whizzy chair, the office chair, is higher. So that forms a hierarchy. I also look to see how many people are coming to the meeting to ensure that it isn't them and us. So it is very conscious when the meeting is about to begin as to where I'm sitting, where everyone else is sitting. I also now do live minutes and make it very clear, is it okay if I type live minutes, which I will read out to you, we'll all agree at the end of the meeting, and then you'll have a copy as well. And they go, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So once again, we go back to, like we were saying with my career, the little things making a big difference, and being conscious. Let's go to before we have the meeting with the parents. That is as important. When are we going to have the meeting? An email saying, how would you like the meeting? Do you want a phone call? Do you want it in person, virtual, hybrid? Because I never want a parent to feel that they have to take half a day off work as holiday to come into school when we could do it a different way that would suit them better. Mm-hmm. So I have hybrid meetings, you know, I have phone calls with myself and a colleague on speakerphone. But when you give those options, people have choice.
Yeah.
They're not being spoken at. They're not being told what they have to do. The options are the options that suit us as SENCOs. But it just, everything becomes a lot more human, doesn't it?